Hey guys, in this video, I want to talk to you about sort of what it means to have a curriculum failure so that you can start to see those things and then start to spot treat them and, interact with me in that process of becoming your own curriculum developer. So this is sort of our just basic worksheet setup, right? You have a worksheet and inside the worksheet there's a bunch of questions. There are a whole lot of ideas behind why we make the questions that we make, why we include or don't include things, the order that we put questions in. But that's sort of second tier, information. The first tier is really just seeing errors that we have right now. Sometimes that's an error sometimes it's just like a typo, right? But sometimes it's something bigger, maybe an error in the answer key, or bigger failures as in things that are like really missing. So to speak. But to understand if a thing is missing, you kind of have to understand what should be there, right? And so if we look at this, you have, this worksheet, there's a bunch of questions. And if we sort of go through, we have, a question. And then let's say if the student gets a question wrong, now they have a responsive, right? So there's something that we can do as instructors that is not just, sort of trying to be like, well, what do you think about this? And what if you did this thing? Because as you will probably have seen, by the time you hit this video, it doesn't really work as well as you hope, right? Every time I like to tell people, every time I try to teach factoring, it just like massively fails. Even if it seems to go so well for like 2 whole weeks, I guarantee week 3 it is not. It's terrible. And so instead of having that, we have this system built in where we have these responsives. The responsives are very, very targeted. They're very specific. And we're working on building these requisite skills, right? So they go and they do the responsive, they get it right, they come back to the question, and they keep going, and we have all these other responsives, right? So anytime a student gets a question wrong, there should be something to do, okay? Sometimes the thing that we do is let the student guess. So there's definitely questions. There is one question, the question where you have to solve for m to the -1 in MathPass. And in that question, in order to do it in one step, we really just have the student explore the question, try things out, and we just sit around saying yes or no, or, if that looks fine, go ahead and try it, or something like that, right? So very, very basic encouragement. And so that would be sort of some of these middle questions here, right? Some of these questions don't necessarily have responses. That's fine. But a lot of questions do. And if there's ever a point where you're in a question and the student just does not get it at all, and there's no responsive of any kind, that's a failure, right? So that's kind of like this thing, right? They get to question 5, totally wrong. They take 50 guesses and they're still getting it wrong. They cannot figure it out. And there's nothing in our curriculum for you to give them, then that's a curriculum failure, right? Now, obviously, we've been doing this for years. We try not to have those types of gaps, but sometimes they do come up, especially on more complex topics. It's not really going to happen on, adding exponents or something, so nothing too basic. But that's a possibility. Another thing that we'll see is, so let's say, the student gets this question wrong, okay? So they get it wrong. They need to then go to this responsive down here. And let's say they do the whole responsive and they do the responsive really well. Totally good. Super great stuff. But then they come back to the question and they still get it lots of wrong, right? Just wrong guess after wrong guess after wrong guess. They're really not getting it. What's happening there? That's another type of a failure. It means that this responsive worksheet, responsive 4, whatever it is, did not do its job. Okay, so whatever it was that we were trying to accomplish in responsive worksheet number 4, it totally just did not do that. And it might be that it only didn't do it for this one student, that every time you use responsive worksheet number 4, it just works so well. It's perfect. The student comes back, they get it right away. But for this particular student, it didn't. And our goal is to teach every student, not just most students, right? Not just 99%, but 100% of students. And so usually, right, that also, if the student's getting it wrong that many times, it'll tell us that probably if we were to improve responsive worksheet 4, it would actually work better for the students it's already working for, right? And working better is better than just working. And so in every possible way, we want to improve that. So that's another sort of type of gap that we have, right? So if we kind of look at, this sort of an idea, if If we have this responsive worksheet failure, the responsive didn't work. The missing responsive failure, that's question 5. This other one in the middle here is also a pretty big one. It's a main worksheet failure, and this is a bit harder to see sometimes. But the way it comes across is, for example, not advanced, the regular combinatorics worksheet. Students were working through the main math curriculum. They would do the combinatorics worksheet. They would get the questions correct. Usually they would struggle, but they would get the questions correct, right? And then 2 or 3 worksheets later, they're doing review problems from combinatorics, and they don't understand like one single iota of anything pertaining to combinatorics. They can't do intermediate combinatorics. They can't do advanced combinatorics. They can't do combinatorics questions that are featured on Math 2. None of it, right? It's not happening. That's a main worksheet critical failure. That's huge, right? So we recently recently at the time of this video, redid the main combinatorics worksheet because it wasn't working, right? If a student can get through that worksheet and they can still have just absolutely no idea, no context, no intuition, nothing at all, no ability regarding combinatorics, then that worksheet's not working, right? And so then we do a complete and total overhaul. If we were to sort of look at these 3 things, right, missing responsive, probably one of the easiest things for you to do. A lot of the missing responsives, it's just sort of like, oh, it would be really convenient if we had a worksheet that was just 10 questions looking at, the fact that A times B, the quantity squared, equals A squared times B squared, and you can break it apart like that. And then you can just make a 10-question worksheet, send it to me. I'll give you some feedback on it. Obviously, I have a lot of intuition about the order of questions and the types of questions and complexity and things of that nature and how students will respond to it. But you can totally throw something together, right? Easily. You can sort of start to look at that. Responsive worksheet failure is also a thing where you can start to look at, question everything that we do. If you see these responsives and it doesn't work for one student one time, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Right? And so let us know, hey, this wasn't working for this student. Do you think it would be better if we did this or if we did this? If you don't have ideas, that's totally okay. Still let us know, right? Definitely let us know. But you don't have to have ideas. But if you do, then just have them, right? Write some stuff down, make some notes, scribble something on a piece of paper, send me a picture of it. I don't care. Whatever it is, just get these ideas out there and we can start to work on them together. Most of the stuff that I do every day is just the result of massive collaboration between myself and Arvin, myself and Terrence and Mercedes and like all of the top instructors who have been here for a really long time, right? And as you stay here longer, I will be working with you, so come and work with me, right? And then one other small thing, we also have this idea. So there are some smaller errors, right? Sometimes a worksheet, a student kind of gets through and they say, well, I'd really like more practice on this, right? Okay, that's a small worksheet failure. We just need a little bit more practice that we can give to some students and not all students. Sometimes students need less practice, right? So you're on like question 20 and you're like, oh my gosh, this student obviously gets this. This is totally a waste of time for this student. That's a small worksheet failure, right? So what we need then is a more streamlined version for students who do it well, and then more practice for those students who need the more practice, right? I've recently done this at the time of this video, with percent more less. And now we have ways of integrating that into the arrays, which are really, really exciting. So we don't even have to create necessarily 2 different worksheets in order to accomplish that. It can be done in the same thing. Needing harder questions versus easier ones, right? Maybe the math questions are so easy that when the students get to the actual SAT, they're not prepared, right? Or the reading questions are too easy, and so when the too hard. And so the students just sit around and they're just struggling and not learning anything at all, right? In which case we need to have different levels. We need to have steps for them to walk up, rungs for them to climb on this ladder, because we can't expect them to just jump to the very top, right? So sometimes the questions are too hard, sometimes they're too easy. Sometimes the questions are too wordy, right? They try to explain things too much. That happens because I tend to be a little bit verbose. I don't know if you've noticed. And it's just when you're making a worksheet, you think, oh, I'm just going to tell them everything. I'm just going to tell them everything because we love learning. We love it, right? And so we just want to share everything with the student. Sometimes the student just can't exactly take everything that we're trying to share with them all at once, right? And so that's okay. So over time, you just start to look at things and say, you know, I really think that this explanation, it's trying to explain too much, right? And because of that, the student's really confused. So the student's sitting here like, I don't know what are you talking about? And that's not really the goal either, obviously. So having that sweet spot of just enough explanation, really, really critical, right? Sometimes videos are too long. Mercedes loves me for saying this, in this lovely, what will probably be a 12-minute video, yay. So sometimes videos are too long, and we need to keep in mind that students have a particular attention span. If it seems like students are not getting something from videos or like a written explanation or just anything at all, if the student is not really getting it from what we have presented to them, then that's a small failure in a way. Right? It sort of seems small. I mean, everything is, we consider it like, important, obviously. But it's sort of a thing that's approachable for you guys, even when you're just coming in. You can start to look at these things and say, hey, I don't think that this video is actually like as effective, or maybe it's too long, or maybe it's too short, or whatever. The student really didn't get it. And then, students are becoming discouraged. That's a really huge thing. So that's the kind of thing that sort of happens with question 5 over here, right? They're getting it wrong. There's no responsive. We have no idea like what we want to send the student to, and we're really stuck as instructors. The student is stuck. And that's, again, sort of that similar idea. Sometimes even if there is a responsive, the student still gets discouraged because they don't want to have to do a responsive because they think that it makes them dumb, or like it's like, oh, you're stupid and therefore you had to do this, right? So they see them as kind of like an ego hit or just things of that nature. So all sorts of things like that, finding ways to phrase things to accommodate that. So I will often say, hey, let's like check this thing out. This is like super cool. Or something like that, instead of like, oh, okay, we need to review, right? So everything from the tiniest of phrasings to the biggest of question orientations, everything in our curriculum is constantly designed to be changed for the better. Right? It's a Word file. We can edit it every single day. It's not a big deal. And so these are a couple of the things, right? There's a ... down here for a reason. This is nowhere near all of it, but it'll give you a little bit of an idea of kind of what you're looking for. And I hope empower you to just like totally feel 100% allowed and encouraged to come and say, I don't think this is working, all of the time. This curriculum grew because I walked in and said, I don't think that this is working, I don't think this is working, and I don't think this is working either, and I think we should change all of these things. And that's what I do still every day. This isn't working, I think we should fix it, I want to make it better. So that's the idea. I'm going to stop now. I hope that this helps. Questions, let me know. See you in the next video.